Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. For this series, my guests and I have been examining the path to open access, open science, and transformative agreements from the perspective of a publisher, Springer Nature. Actually, the word transformative is no joke. Making the shift to open access has had a major impact up and down the content supply chain, from research to production and editing, distribution technology, sales, and, of course, libraries and end users. In this series, we've been getting some valuable insight into how Springer Nature began its journey to support open access and open science, the important lessons learned, the milestones along the way, and how this mission is changing the way we interact with scholarly content in profound ways. Joining me for this discussion is Caroline Nevison, Director of Commercial Transition to OA at Springer Nature, and Dr. Ritu Dhand, Vice President, Editorial, Nature Journals at Springer Nature. In this final episode, which is sponsored by Springer Nature, we talk about how researchers and librarians are working through the transitions post-agreement, how OA is continuing to impact subscription content, and the broader implications of open science for our society. Caroline, I think we'll stick with you real briefly, and I'm wondering, where else are researchers and librarians asking for guidance as they navigate transformative agreements? I'm wondering how these communities sort of look to you as the publisher, for assistance. What's the relationship there in terms of the structure and agreement, between you guys and librarians and authors, researchers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the guidance that we're asked for is really wide-ranging. Of course, we're really proud that we're sort of seen as at the forefront of this transition, both for authors and institutions. We've got dedicated customer services teams to tackle author queries specifically, and Ritu mentioned earlier about our dedicated funding support channels to help authors navigate, the options available to them. With regards to the library community, I think the breadth of questions is really high. They might come into our sales teams, they might come to our library account development teams, or we also have specific, OA engagement teams and teams working on these agreements. I think it depends where the institution and country is at on their open access journey. Some might be asking general questions. What is a transformative agreement? What is a transformative journal? What's a CPC BY license? Because the libraries need to support their researchers answering those questions, and they need to think about their future. But I'd say those further along the journey, we're talking about topics such as how to harness and use funder information at an article level. We're trying to look together at how to predict future publishing behavior at their institution. We're talking about how and when they might want to move their institutional spend allocation from one based on historical subscription spend to one based on publishing output, which is not a shift to be underestimated. And increasingly, it's the libraries that are playing a real pivotal role here in the author communication at their institution, alongside, of course, the research offices. And it's really important that we can support this. We have to be mindful, though, that we are one player, and there are different policies and agreement structures at other publishers. So, I definitely say the libraries do have their work cut out navigating this. That said, real, huge efforts have to be made. But one huge positive that we've mentioned in a previous episode, that once these agreements in place, if they can cover the output for eligible authors across the full hybrid portfolio, then that's such a positive message that the libraries can give out to their authors, that their publication can be published open access at no additional cost to the author.
So then, just kind of continuing on that string, what are you noticing post agreement in terms of, after you've had an agreement in place with an institution or consortium, what are some of the, maybe a year or two down the line, what are some of the things, that you're helping those folks deal with?
I would like to say that because we have quite a few years of experience behind us now, setting up, launching these agreements, of course, we try and make the experience as efficient and positive as possible. One thing that we consistently receive really good feedback about is the workflows from the end-to-end author journey onto the reporting of the articles that are approved under the agreement. So the institutions, they get a live access to a live dashboard, and it's usually the library that's kind of overseeing this. And it gives them a really impressive oversight of the publishing at their institution. So we know that they're using that, especially, as you say, once they've got a couple of years of publishing behind them, they're using that in multiple ways. They've got this really positive message that they can give to their departments, to their researchers about, this agreement being available across a large number of journals. They can start to see the overall citation altmetric benefit of publishing these papers open access. And one thing that we're starting to be able to look at now is sort of who is accessing that open access content. So if a country has published X amount of open access content, where is this content now accessible to global researchers who previously may not have had access to it or didn't have access to it? And of course, what can this mean for the future of science research? How is that country contributing to this development through having the TA? So, I think that's where some of the conversations are going. And of course, it's a really great conversation for a library to be able to have with senior staff at their organization. Actually, just one more thing I was thinking about is one development in some of these agreements that started really early on. They didn't quite cover the full hybrid portfolio always from Springer Nature. So we do have a couple of imprints, academic journals on nature.com and the Palgrave Macmillan journals, which are HSS predominantly. Some of our early agreements weren't able to capture them straight away. So now in the renewals, we're being able to add them in. And that is really exciting because we can see the impact these agreements can have. And especially when you think about typically underfunded disciplines, such as humanities and social sciences, adding that into the mix can also be a real positive for an institution.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you. And then, Dr. Dhand, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about OA content and subscription content. And this might just be sort of a conceptual thing folks might be wrestling with. But in terms of how OA is impacting the quote unquote value of subscription content, what is considered subscription content in a world of open access?
Yeah, Bill, it is a question that's being asked. And as I started this podcast series, sort of espousing that open science isn't just relevant for open access publications. And for many, many years, the Nature journals, as subscription journals, have had editorial strategies in play to make research open. Supporting the authors to deposit data in open repositories, depositing protocols in open databases, submitting preprints to facilitate early sharing of research. We've had peer review trials for the last 5-6 years aiming to make parts of the peer review process more transparent. And there's still plenty to do. And we will continue to persuade and cajole and prod the scientific community to publish more open research. And I think it should always be remembered that publishing paper as open access is a part of the process. Caroline talked about many of the benefits of open access in publishing, some of which mean that, research subscription means that, some of which cannot reach everyone. But the subscription publishing is a model that allows publishers to meet costs, but it's different to the practice of open science, which is an endeavor that starts way before submission of a paper and it continues after its publication. And it requires a lot more investment into the entire research process.
Mm-hmm. Right. So sticking with that, Dr. Dan, I'm wondering, and you can sort of take us to the end here, if you could talk a little bit more about open science, particularly what the implications there are for science and practice and for society at large.
I think society at large witnessed the benefits of open science when the world was hit by the COVID pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I say it was amazing to watch. There were many, many downsides from the pandemic. And as much as everyone else, I was deep in it personally, as well as professionally. But I did feel on occasion like I was watching the most amazing scientific communication in action from the sidelines for the very first time on a global scale. Researchers, without pushing, prodding, cajoling, were sharing their data before publication. They were supporting each other, resolving each other's problems. Much of this happened on a world stage of social media. This became the platform of choice for quick and easy scientific engagement. It was absolutely amazing to see so much collegiality on a global scale. And not only were there researchers and editors, but journalists were also able to see science in action and in turn report on it quickly and accurately, engaging the world at large. All the publishers, including Springer Nature and the Nature journals, also came together, and we committed to publish the research on COVID on preprint servers to facilitate that early sharing of the results. The community were reviewing preprints openly so that flaws were picked up in real time and could be seen by everyone. All researchers committed to depositing data in open repositories, which is the dream come true. Where possible, shared reagents and methodology amongst biopharma as well. It phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal experience. As a publisher, we also committed to publish the research as fast as we can and open so that it could be accessed by all. The general public were able to engage with researchers in real time in a way that they'd never been able to before. Researchers became the celebrity, which I never thought I'd see. This was the open science dream. This is the reason we all want to support open science. And the question now is, how much of that will remain? All the issues that I talked about in our first episode for scientists with their personal funding, promotion, reward, they're all still there. Right. A great deal more investment into researchers as well as infrastructure and science communication absolutely happens before we're able to communicate research fully open. And it was great this year to see the G7 spot a light on open science, where they noted that they would work together to address the administrative, legal, and regulatory barriers that hinder our scientific cooperation. And they also went further and committed to promote the efficient processing and sharing of research data as openly as possible and as securely as necessary across the G7 and beyond. And that was amazing. So let's hope this level of commitment and support remains and is actually realized. And the open science dream is here to stay.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. Well, that's all we have time for. Caroline and Dr. Dhand, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thanks, Bill. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Bill. It's been an absolute joy and an honor to be able to tell your listeners about the Open Science program on Springer Nature Journals.
Excellent. Thank you. You just heard from Caroline Nevison, Director of Commercial Transition to OA at Springer Nature, and Dr. Ritu Dhand, Vice President, Editorial, Nature Journals at Springer Nature. Springer Nature is the sponsor of this 4-part series of the Authority File. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.